Okay, so welcome everyone. For those who don't know, this is Engineers Week, and we have a number of events that have been scheduled to celebrate engineers and the accomplishments of engineers. And our highlight event is this evening. Thank you very much for taking the time out to come and listen to a conversation I'm going to have with Dr. Shini Somara. To start off, we have a little video that she chose to kind of inspire the audience and get us going. So I'm going to let them play that, and then we'll start with the conversation.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Keen minds will be needed with the best possible college education.
But you know what we can really use is some more scientists and some more engineers who are building and making things.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
When I saw this for the first time, just earlier today, it reminded me of the sense of awe I have almost every time I sit on an airplane and I look out at this huge instrument that's going to take 200, 300 people up in the air. And I said, we built this. I take credit, but obviously I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm always awestruck by human-made inventions. That's what engineering is all about. So let's welcome Dr. Somara here this evening. And I'm going to start off by just asking you to explain, why you chose to have this video to start off, and give us a little bit of your own story.
Yeah, so initially it was a few clips from my recent work, because I've done crash course physics, crash course engineering. I've done quite a bit of TV, all in the sort of science and technology and innovation space, where I'm reporting on all these incredible technological advancements. But instead of showing clips about me, I wanted to show this video because I think it really encapsulates what engineering is about. And you mentioned that this is Engineering Week, and for me, engineering is a much, much bigger picture than maybe what you guys are considering right now, which is, what should I do for my education? What kind of job do I want at the end of my education? Like, you're all probably piecing together plans for your future careers. And I remember being at that point myself and making decisions about taking mechanical engineering, which is what I did, and then I did my PhD after that in fluid dynamics, and they were all kind of microscopic decisions, but actually there's a much, much bigger picture going on. And I think this video really encapsulates that, which is that engineers really can make a difference. They can really impact people's lives. From a child hearing for the first time to so many other amazing technologies that we're still yet to think of, And what I love about engineering, and actually the more engineers I meet, so today has been an amazing day meeting engineers at Northeastern, and the more engineers I meet, the more I realize that engineers are just doing all this work to just make the quality of our lives better. And I really believe that engineers are unsung heroes. I mean, they have such a massive impact on society, and I don't think engineers are given the credit they deserve. And all of you are going to be part of a cohort, hopefully, if you choose engineering, that can really change the course of our future. And it sounds like a massive kind of lofty statement, but honestly, engineering really has the power to change our futures.
So tell us a little bit, you're an engineer, so
Yeah.
tell us your story.
So my story is that originally, well, going even further back, my dad is an engineer, and I think he's my biggest inspiration. I kind of grew up in a household where he was always saying, "Why do you think that happens? And tell me how you think that works." And it was like this nurturing of curiosity, this constant asking questions. He is an engineer through and through, and so he was always finding kind of quirky solutions to micro problems in the house. I was always being the eldest daughter, I was always the kid holding the Hoover, the vacuum cleaner under the drill.
For me, it was the light, as my father worked on the cars.
Yeah.
I got to hold the light. Yeah.
And I think that kind of practical, helpful, just doing things approach to growing up is really where the engineering mindset started. And I followed in his footsteps by studying mechanical engineering, so I did that as an undergrad. And then from there, well, during my undergrad, absolutely fell in love with computational fluid dynamics. It just blew my mind that you could use mathematical equations to visualize the invisible. So normally we don't see how fluids behave. We don't see gases, we don't see the air in this room. We don't see water around a ship. But using CFD, computational fluid dynamics, you could visualize on a computer screen how these gases and liquids behave and keep aeroplanes in the sky by designing better aircraft wings, And I wanted to be part of the progress of CFD. And so I did my doctorate straight after my undergrad. And what was crazy is back then, we're talking a long time ago now, back then, you could only really take a snapshot picture of what the airflow was doing. And I specialized in enclosed spaces, so how is air moving in a building? And so you could take a picture of the airflow, but it's useful for engineers, but it could be more useful with a bit of research. So my research was about taking fluid dynamics from being static to dynamic. How does fluid flow change with time? So that took me 4.5 years to complete. I was based in industry because I did a doctorate that was sponsored by a company. So I was part of a university, Brunel University in London.
Your accent, I thought it was Florida, but okay, I get it now.
Yeah,
okay,
no,
go on.
British,
Yeah.
I'm definitely British. So attached to a university to do academic research, but funded by a CFD company. So I actually went every day to an office, and I chose this setup because I didn't want to be an academic. I wanted to do academic research, but I didn't want to be like a doctoral student that was kind of detached from industry. I wanted to have like a soft launch into industry. And this kind of doctorate was the perfect way to do it. So it was marrying academia with industry, which is quite hard to do with a doctorate, because you've got all these commercial kind of interests, but you're trying to keep it authoritative. in terms of research. So that was an interesting journey, which took me 4.5 years. And during those 4.5 years, I had to do a few modules, one of which was called Talking to the Media. And that was where I learned how to speak on television and radio. And I think one of the biggest things I learned about that 1-week course was that if I talk about my research, in the context of the way I was researching at the time, everyone would either fall asleep or just it would go over their head. And I really realized the power of communication and learning how to translate very complex language into something that was engaging and where you could literally see the lights in people's eyes go, I get it. I get what you mean. And I became quite sort of like addicted to that sort of like light bulb moment in people's eyes. And so I wanted to do that more after my doctorate. I wanted to go into communication, and television was the most powerful way of reaching lots of people. And I started on this television journey where I was behind the camera, researching, assistant producing, editing, all of those roles. Ended up in front of camera. A few years later, it was actually a live program, 8 million viewers that night. And I was talking about porous paving, so a bit of innovation that was happening at the time. And we were doing like these experiments where we were like throwing water on gravel and all these different ways of, because at the time, like London has a real problem, especially it's a concrete jungle. And every time it rains, the water has nowhere to go, so drains get flooded, they overflow, and so at the time there was a law that was being put down that said any paving has to be porous, so water has to be able to pass through it. So a bit of technology involved, that's why I was asked to do that piece. And I honestly got the bug for television. And then I just kept doing it and doing it. I think I got my first proper TV break in America, because I was asked to host a technology show on Al Jazeera. It's called Techno, and I just got to cover the most amazing stories, like, you know, just incredible innovations in technology, traveling all over the world, doing that. And then I did Crash Course Physics, and that was like an amazing experience to be able to help people with their studies in physics, their AP level physics. It really interested me to be able to provide free education using digital platforms. And at the time, because I recorded Crash Course Physics in 2016, and at the time, people in TV told me, if you do that, it will ruin your TV career. And I was like, I don't care. I want to provide free education. You know, my dad comes from Sri Lanka. He was lucky to go to school and ended up becoming a great engineer. I was like, I want to do that for other people. I want to give people a chance to educate themselves. And Crash Course Physics was the best way to do that for me.
Are people here familiar with Crash Course? Who here has benefited from? Yeah, so we have some fans here.
Yay.
Great.
Perfect. Oh, cool.
Using it now. There you go.
Perfect. So yeah, Crash Course wasn't a hindrance for TV. It was actually the future, because no one who watches TV these days, who actually even owns a television. Everyone watches and consumes media on their phones. And so I didn't realize at the time, but actually television was dying out and digital was becoming the thing. And Crash Course was really an interesting time. And now I'm just doing more of it. So, yeah.
Good. So it's very reassuring to say that the reason you did Crash Course was not to kind of promote yourself or to advance your career. It was despite your career, you decided to do that because of the educational value.
Yeah, I think education, I don't know if this is a very Sri Lankan upbringing kind of mentality, but education for me is absolutely key. And it's one of the reasons why I love engineering, because it's one of these courses or modes of study that gives you such lifelong skills. So even if you don't end up in engineering, which I hope you do, because we really need engineers all over the world, that even if you don't end up in engineering, it teaches you things that you will keep for life. And those crash course series, I think, kind of help people on their journey with that.
Right. So people in the audience may not know there's a connection between Crash Course and Northeastern. One of our faculty in chemical engineering, Professor Lucas Lander, was involved in Crash Course. And actually, why don't you tell how you know of him?
So I actually met him for the first time today in person. But 5 years ago, when we were doing Crash Course Engineering, it was Dr. Lucas who was basically helping with the consulting of the script and kind of, I mean, there was a team of us. So many people think that I was solely responsible for Crash Course Physics and Crash Course Engineering, but actually there was an amazing team really dedicated to making those videos as powerful as they are, and Lucas was one of those people. He basically wrote those 50 videos. You know, the brief was, let's summarize engineering, because with physics, we literally took the AP syllabus and chopped it up into 50 bits. Whereas there is no syllabus for engineering. It's either degree level, but there's no kind of like AP level. So we were essentially inventing our own AP level for engineering. And I think one of the most fundamental things about that series is that we were telling people about all the different aspects of engineering. Because I think this is, you know, we talked about a PR problem. Engineering is such a broad term, right? When you think of engineers or engineering, you tend to think of hard hats, overalls, fluorescent jackets, and you don't think about the scope of engineering and the coolness and the cutting edgeness that engineering actually entails. So we wanted to introduce a bit of that. You know, there's biomedical engineering, there's chemical engineering, there's nuclear engineering, nanotechnology, like just so many different aspects to engineering. And 5 years ago, we were talking about what we knew then about engineering. And in those 5 years, I've learned even more.
So you have a new book that's coming out. Can you tell us, I don't have a copy here, but those little raffle tickets you have, I think how many, 12 or 15 of you are going to get a copy of a book? It's not even out yet. So you're going to get
As usual, in America, you guys always get things first.
Well, ask and you shall receive. And Dr. Somara will be available to sign them at the end of this session. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and why you wanted to create that book?
Yeah, so in 2018, I started writing my first set of books for 5 to 7-year-olds. And the reason why I wanted to write books for such small kids is because over the years, I have done many talks to young people, particularly young girls, trying to encourage more people into engineering. So I would typically talk to people around the ages of, like, let's just say 13 and up. And the idea was that I would hopefully try and, in my own little way, move the needle to get more diversity and equality in engineering. But year on year, I was not seeing any kind of change. Not that I was expecting to like make a massive impact, but when you keep hearing that every year there's only 12% females in engineering, it's kind of a bit disheartening. So I was thinking, why is it that I ended up in engineering and I never thought twice about it, but yet girls don't choose engineering? And I realized it's because we're talking to girls and underrepresented groups too late. So let's go back to grassroots and let's look at the biases and the outdated stereotypes that are set up when we are small. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was playing with Lego and toy cars and all the things that like interested my dad when he was a little boy. I was playing with those kinds of toys when I was a kid. I wasn't interested in dolls and things like that. And you know, why don't we give children equal, you know, why don't we introduce them to things that will interest them? You know, why do we dress girls in pink and boys in blue? You know, there are biases that we set up, I think, unconsciously. So the first 4 books are, I call them the Like Me series because the titles are An Engineer Like Me, A Scientist Like Me, A Coder Like Me, and A Mathematician Like Me. And they're for 5 to 7-year-olds. And they aim to break stereotypes. So an engineer like me is a little brown girl who goes about her every day looking at the engineering that's around her. And she sees planes in the sky and elevators and escalators and trolley kind of wheels. And there's engineering everywhere. It's quite astounding when you write books for kids that you notice actually the coolness of engineering and the everydayness. Then I wrote 2 more books about physics and energy for a slightly older audience, 9 to 11s. And then my latest book, my 7th book, is called Engineers Making a Difference. And honestly, I think this is my most significant book project because it's taken me 2 years to write. It's out on the 2nd of March. And basically, it's about 46 engineers who are a very diverse bunch of people. It's pretty much 50-50 gender split in there. There's a transgender person in there, and they are all amazing engineers. The book is supported by Imperial College in London and the Gatsby Foundation, who are a big fan of apprenticeships. And so I've got like professors to apprentices and technicians and everyone in between, and they are all engineers, and they're all making a difference in their own way. There's 12 different chapters, from human needs to communication to going beyond our planet, transportation, and it really looks at the difference they're making in these different chapters. So I had an idea for this book 2 years ago, and since writing that book, I'm now more convinced than ever about the importance of what engineers do. Because, first of all, they're just not given the acknowledgement they deserve, right? I really have an issue with this stereotype. I think probably because actually when I graduated with my doctorate and I was fully in industry, I probably left engineering because I didn't see anyone like me. And so I was kind of like outnumbered, and I ended up having a bit of a like confidence issue, thinking, why would anyone listen to me? I'm not like everyone else. You know, no one's gonna take me seriously because I don't fit the engineering mold. And in writing this book, I now see engineers truly being themselves, pursuing their genuine interest in their chosen fields. And I'm positively encouraged by the engineers I'm meeting, especially today, being at Northeastern. But I've met so many incredible engineers that are doing things that didn't exist maybe 10 years ago. They have the courage to like push boundaries and kind of be visionary and invent things and get creative. All these, I mean, creativity. Whoever thought that creativity would be a word in engineering? You know, artistic. I don't know. There's so much collaboration and cross-pollination and interdisciplinariness going on in engineering today. And so because of all that, I now really am convinced that engineering is probably the most exciting profession that you can go into, purely because it's like uncharted territory. You know, so you study engineering, you get these amazing skills, and then you go out into industry and you basically invent stuff. You use your ingenuity. You like, the world is your oyster when you have engineering skills, I think.
Yeah. Is there a particular profile in the book that you find inspirational or just stands out in your mind?
I have a particular magnetism to projects that really help people. So I don't want to single anyone out in the book because they're all amazing. But the first engineer in the book is a guy who was working at Dyson. He was making even better vacuum cleaners, had a really highly paid job, and everything was fantastic. But one day went to work and was like, why am I making engineering better for rich people? I should be using my skills to help people that don't have much. So he gave up his job. His mum was so mad at him. But he gave up his job and took 18 months out to work with Engineers Without Borders. He ended up in South India. He's Sikh. And he went to South India and was making cook stoves that run on solar power. And he was like, on Monday we were designing, on Tuesday we were prototyping, on Wednesday we were doing something else, on Thursday I was like, this is sounding like a Craig David song. But it was just so like basic, it was back to basic, like fundamental engineering, you know, designing, building, testing, prototyping, iterating. And today he started his own company making hand-cranked washing machines. And these washing machines have been sent to war-torn countries, people who are off-grid, don't have consistent electricity. And basically, people can live with a bit more dignity in wearing clean clothes. You know, things that we take for granted. You know, we do our laundry all the time. But what happens if you don't have much water? If you don't have like a consistent electricity supply, you still got to clean your clothes, and it can be back-breaking work. He identified a problem and found a solution. So I love his story. But I think with all of the engineers in the book, there is one consistent trait, and they all love solving problems, and they're all super curious. Like, they just want to keep learning. And they've got a really healthy relationship with failure. And failure is a word that we define as like, it went wrong, there was a mistake, something went bad, you know. But actually, failure for engineers, I mean, within a certain sort of like limitation or within tolerances, is such an amazing way to learn. So when things go wrong, an experiment breaks, an engineer will be like, okay, how can I fix this? Like, how can I make this better? What can I learn from this? And I think we live in a society where failure is like, we're all terrified of failing. And engineers are not terrified. They're like, bring it on.
I still resonate with that because one of the mantras for my own career has been fail fast so that you can succeed more quickly.
Yeah.
Because you learn from the things that don't work initially. All right, I have some other questions and conversation. I'm happy to continue, but I want to give people in the audience an opportunity to ask your own questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Dr. Somara, there are a couple of microphones out here. I would ask when you, I'll tell you when to speak, but if you would introduce yourselves, tell us if you're an engineering student here at Northeastern or some other program here at Northeastern or from outside of Northeastern. We actually have some, I believe, some high school students who had RSVP'd that would come. So we welcome all of you. So please, if you have a question, stand up now and ask it. And if you don't ask questions, then you're going to get my boring questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Kim.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim. This is a question from online, a virtual question. What new fields of engineering do you see emerging in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, space is a really exciting field. I've really seen a lot of commercialization, a lot of private space companies popping up. And to tackle really interesting kind of engineering conundrums, like, you know, we may run out of a certain element, let's just say lithium, I don't know. Where can we get it from space? You know, and all the kind of crazy engineering ideas to pull resources from beyond our planet. So I think that's really interesting. there's a real massive interest in AI and data, which is a very interesting space from an engineering point of view, because I think we're in the kind of generation of nuts and bolts and kind of like making stuff and components and handling parts. But I think engineering is going in a direction where it's very much digital. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of learning to code and kind of getting those skills under your belt, because, you know, for example, manufacturing. In my day, I sound really old. I am, actually. But in
I know
my
someone
day,
who's older.
manufacturing, when I was kind of in that engineering space, was very much about like CNC machines and kind of, there was no digital aspect. Whereas today, everything is going digital. So, you know, 3D printers are just becoming more and more sophisticated, and kind of programming things, programming old machines to do new things. I think that's a very interesting space. So yeah, those are the two things that pop out right now.
Can you step up to the microphone so that everyone can hear you? And if you want to ask a question, you can just, instead of raising your hand, just, oh, you've got one over there. So we'll start over here. Sorry, he was there before. And then we'll come over here. And introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Raymond. I'm a first-year mechanical engineer at Northeastern. I was just curious, do you feel like as a mechanical engineer there were any mechanical engineering specific traits that translated to the rest of your career? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I think, well, macroscopically, being methodical and logical and rational are skills that didn't come naturally to me. I was terrible at maths when I was kind of 0 to, I think I was around 15, struggled with maths. And then I basically was like, if I don't get this maths thing, engineering is not gonna be something that I can progress in. So I just worked extra hard in maths, and then around the age of 15, the penny dropped. I was like, oh, I get this. And it just became so logical, and it just was a real moment of epiphany moment. And then from there, you know, you develop logic and rationale and methodology. So mechanical engineering, I mean, because I studied mechanical engineering, I don't know what it would have been like to study any other type of engineering. So, and I'm definitely not a chemist, and I'm definitely not someone that can deal with like electrical engineering. I just can't get my head around it. But for me, mechanical engineering was so tangible. You know, like, just for example, as a contrast, I can really do mechanics, like maths and mechanics. I can understand, you know, relative velocity. If something's traveling at this speed and something's traveling at this speed, like, you know, how does that compute? Whereas I can't do really stats and probability and bell-shaped curves, and I don't have the brain for it. So mechanical engineering for me is really, really, it just makes sense. And I just feel like you can build stuff to prove stuff. And that's what I think I get from mechanical engineering versus any other type of engineering.
Okay. Thank you. Over here.
Hi, my name's Anna. I'm a second-year chemical engineering major, and I was wondering, you mentioned that you had a background in fluid dynamics. You kind of strayed away from that with your career with media and technology and communication through engineering. If you were to go back into that, what kind of technologies would you be interested in working in?
Well, so my media work has taken me away from the detail of engineering. But the work I do today, which is very much talking and communicating science and technology, I believe, has really needed my doctoral kind of introduction. because I think one of my greatest passions, I won't say my greatest strengths, because I don't know how I do on this, but my greatest passion is taking complex content and turning it into something that people can understand and access and engage with. And I think I can only do that translation because I have had the in-depth knowledge. So now when I meet academics and they're very much immersed in their research, and I ask them a question, and then 20 minutes later they've like gone off on a tangent because they're so involved with what they're doing, I'm able to zoom out and say, okay, so what you're saying is, and that like summarize it in a way that anyone can understand it. I just don't think I would have been able to do that without doing my doctorate. Because if anything, it's kind of a confidence thing that I have once been a deep academic, and now I've chosen to kind of be in the space of like just being a human rather than a specialist. And so the second part of your question is, if I was to go back to it, what would I want to do? And honestly, every time I meet engineers in any sphere, I'm always so envious of what they do. I mean, today I met James. What's his surname?
Oh.
Tukba?
Richard? Was it? Yeah.
I met James, who showed me his work in the human-robot interface and how humans and robots interact. And I was just like, oh my God, your work is so cool. He was in a lab with like all this stuff. Like, there's just engineering everywhere. I mean, I felt like I was in a candy store. Like, it was just, and I would love to, I think I just get so, I get infected by engineers' enthusiasm for their work, and I kind of want to do all kinds of things. And fluid dynamics, the fluid dynamics I did was amazing for me at the time. And you know, even I sit here now and I've already like checked out where the inlets and outlets of the room is, and you know, it's still with me. But would I return to that? I don't know, because things have moved on in the years that have passed, and you know, now CFD is very much open source. You know, you can do CFD now. You can go online and pick up a program, and I mean, that just wasn't the case when I was doing it. So times have moved on. And I love being at the forefront of where we are today.
Thank you.
We may come back to this later, but one thing you should note from what Dr. Somara is saying is the importance of communication skills. Whatever discipline you're in, it's very important that you're able to communicate, to understand a problem from people, to be able to communicate a potential solution. And maybe we'll come back to that later, but that's the key to success, and you should be striving to build your communication skills. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, it's going to make you a better person, engineer or otherwise.
On that note, I would definitely say, even though I'm fairly confident as a speaker, this makes me nervous to stand up here and talk, so practice makes perfect. My name is James. I'm a fourth-year computer science major, and my question is, you mentioned how back when you were doing crash course physics and crash course engineering that you kind of had to put together a lot of the curriculum yourselves as the team. And to my knowledge, there still doesn't exist any AP engineering. Where do you see the future of engineering education going, especially as it pertains to sort of the experiential learning aspects to engineering?
Yeah, well, first of all, well done on having the courage to get up and ask a question. Because I think public speaking actually does involve a lot of nerves, and those nerves are good nerves because it kind of gives you the boost you need to speak up. So I see engineering, the study of engineering. Do you know what? You've actually really introduced me to where I think engineering needs to go. Because being here at Northeastern, I've actually seen the embodiment of the direction that engineering needs to steer into, which is, you talked about co-ops. We had a lunch today with a bunch of engineering women, and they were telling me about their co-op experiences. And this is the idea of studying engineering, but then taking 6 months out to go into industry. You get paid, and you just get all this industry experience. This is massively progressive, because back where I'm from in the UK, you've got the degree, and you can do a 3-year degree, and you spend a lot of money getting your education, and then you finish your degree, and you've got student debt and no industry experience, and you join this cohort of engineers who are qualified, who are all struggling to get their very first graduate job, and industry and industrial experience is what makes you more hireable or employable. Industry experience is key. And so on the other side of the spectrum of that, you've got apprenticeships in the UK where you are in industry doing a part-time degree. And in the UK, apprenticeships have this kind of stigma that it's low level, you're not very academic, you're kind of more labor focused, or it's more practical because maybe you weren't good at school. And so you've got like academia and apprenticeships, and it's like, this is what my book is about. It's like, why are we creating this divide? And so here at Northeastern, I've learned today that you are bridging that divide by actually putting academics in industry, and it's genius to be doing that, because the fact that you get industry experience and you're getting paid just makes everything, I don't know, it's great. And industry essentially can train graduates for the job that they hope to hire once you qualify. So everyone's winning in those situations.
Just to interject, at lunch we were also talking about this notion of failure. So you can fail in your co-op, and that's ultimately a win, because you prevent yourself from going into a career that you really don't want. And so your co-op as a failure, our president will tell you that's a good thing, that you learn sooner rather than later. Sorry to interrupt.
The ladies at the lunch were saying that they learn a lot about what they didn't want to do in the 6 months. And it's like, one lady was studying biomechanical and is now going to electrical.
Yeah, is there anyone here who's had a co-op experience that taught you what you didn't want to do after you graduated? So
yeah,
that's learning. That's great.
So actually, another thing at lunch that I started saying, but then we got sidetracked, was this idea of entrepreneurialism. Engineers are amazing problem solvers. They come up with incredible ideas which could end up being commercialized, but what you need is business experience. And so I don't know if you're doing this at Northeastern, but the idea of training engineers to have a business mind on top of their engineering skills will make them so hot.
So are we doing this at Northeastern?
Yeah?
Yes, we have the Sherman Center for Entrepreneurial Education. We have programs with DeMoore McKim that allow the combination of engineering undergraduate with a +1 business degree. We can do better, we can do more, but yeah, it's important to mix those skills.
So it's all about kind of street cred in a way. And like, I don't know, in the UK, I feel like engineers are seen as kind of, the best professions are like doctor, lawyer, there's like a ranking system, and engineering is quite low. This is not the case in Germany. In Germany, engineers are CEOs, they are top of the companies, they are really highly regarded. And I feel, going back to the original question about the way engineering is going in terms of education, I feel like engineers need to realize that they are really important individuals. They can lead companies. They can, drive change. They can be pioneers. So be that, get qualified to be that. And I think here in Northeastern, one of the major things that I've picked up from my day here today is that you can switch majors. And so you can just pick up like a bunch of skills and really tailor your education to what suits you and where your true interests are and your talents and your skills. And I think that is extremely progressive when it comes to teaching engineering.
Hi, I'm Abe. I'm a fifth-year chemical engineering student. And my question is actually about entrepreneurship. So say you have a good idea and you want to pursue it, but you're also, your last year of school, you're looking for a full-time job. I would like it, I would compare it to writing a book. So maybe how would you make a decision of when and how to pursue an independent idea, and what would be your advice on doing that?
I can only really tell you from a kind of self-developmental type of perspective, because I don't know how. That's
preferred, yeah.
I don't know how it works in the US, but we back in the UK we have I can't remember what they're called now, but they're basically spin-offs. So universities can be very supportive of spin-off ideas. So a lot of people that start PhDs end up actually taking their PhD research into a commercial direction, and they start companies. Off the top of my head, there is an engineer in my book who did a PhD on chicken feathers. So chicken feathers is a waste product. I mean, when you think about the amount of chickens we consume, there's a lot of feathers that are left over. And what she has done is kind of clean them, recycle them, and turn them into packaging. And that was as a result of starting a PhD and then starting a company. And I think you have to take a massive leap of faith. And I don't know how it works in the US, but universities are often very supportive.
Yeah.
Knowledge transfer, that's it.
You can come talk to me after, but I would tell you to go see, if you haven't already met Ted Johnson from the Sherman Center, you should go meet him and find it, because there's also a network of peer entrepreneurs who can help you as well.
And just in terms of timing in your life and career, any advice on that? When is a good time to pursue an idea?
Don't waste your time trying to please other people. We'll get a lot of advice from parents, friends, family, people that care about us and love us. But really try and follow your true calling. I spent a lot of time trying to push myself into an engineering mold. And I wasted a lot of time doing that. I should have realized that, yes, I'm an engineer at my core, but I also really love communication, and I would have maybe got there sooner. I don't know. I think everything unfolds perfectly. It's happening exactly as it should. But just don't waste time trying to fulfill other people's expectations or trying to fit stereotypes. Be a pioneer, be a trailblazer. And times will get hard when you're the only one doing something, but keep going, follow your inner compass.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maram, and I'm a third-year chemical engineering major. And you've talked about your inspiration of going from industry and academia and pivoting into a more media-focused career. And as somebody who's really interested in that interface between STEM and media and communications, how would you recommend finding that in that interface, and where to even start with that?
I think today I would give the advice of build your own brand. I wouldn't give advice of how I got into media, because honestly, in the beginning, I had a catalogue, a literal book full of production companies and it was organized by chapter. And one of the chapters was production companies that make factual entertainment. And then I looked at all the ones that made science and tech documentaries, and I wrote to them, and I sent a VHS tape, like this is how long ago it was, of me being on camera, which was filmed on a camcorder. I mean, it's embarrassing how long ago it was. And but what I guess the thinking behind that approach was, I want to go into television. I want to talk about science and tech. I've just finished my doctorate, but I'm going to have to start from the beginning. And so it was very much like going back to basics, like what do I need to do? Who do I need to contact? What do I need to learn? And having the humility to kind of just start from scratch. But like today, I feel like a lot of things are falling into place because I've been very passionate about certain things, and it's all coming together like now, after many years of like, 5 years ago I started a podcast for women in STEM, and that was as a result of having a conversation with an evolutionary biologist where she was talking about living in a tent in Madagascar for 1 year, and she hadn't looked in a mirror for a year, and how when she came back to her city life, she was forever changed because she hadn't cared about her appearance, and then she was living in a city where everyone cares about their appearance, and it was kind of a weird contrast for her. And we were just having this really like personal chat, and I was like, we really need to put this on camera. We need to record this conversation, and we need to share it with people because it's so like personally enriching. And she was like, I will never ever talk about this in public because I'm a woman in STEM. I've got to protect my job. I can't be talking about things like this. I've got to be professional. I just thought that is so sad that we don't get to hear these nuggets of wisdom. Anyway, I started a podcast where I basically kept all of my female guests anonymous. I would change the pitch and tone of their voices so they were like non-identifiable. And that was 5 years ago. Today, women are saying, I want to talk about being a woman in STEM. I actually want to say who I am. That's how times have changed. But the point of that story is that I just wanted to hear from these women. I wanted to have these conversations. I didn't do it for the audience, levels. I didn't do it to get likes, to have followers. I did it because I wanted to speak to women because I didn't know any women in STEM. So I was always following a genuine kind of need of my own. Like I've always just been very true to what I want to do. And I think when you do things genuinely and you kind of follow like an authentic path, I think you can only succeed, really.
Hi, my name is Sanjana. I'm a fourth-year bioengineer, and I'm on track to start my PhD in bioengineering in the fall. And I feel as a woman of color in engineering that it's my duty to uplift other women of color in engineering. And I think during my undergrad experience, being president of the Biomedical Engineering Society, I've been able to do that. But now as I am ready to graduate and move on to other stages of my life, I was wondering if you had any advice on how I could continue on doing a similar role in maybe even a bigger capacity.
In a what capacity?
In a bigger capacity.
Well, you tell me, like, what do you think is missing? One of the things about engineering is we always identify a problem and then we come up with an idea for fixing it. So given your experience of what you've been doing as a representative of the underrepresented, what have you learned? Where are the gaps? Where can you make a difference? Only you know that because you've experienced being that role model. It's so much easier today to have a voice. You can jump on social media and say something and gain a following by doing that. Like, you can affect people's lives just by speaking up. And it's easier today because of social media than it's ever been. I remember the days when I was like having meetings with the BBC and I knew what I wanted to do, but they were the only channel to doing it, and they just weren't ready to receive that. So I never did anything on TV that I wanted to do. Whereas because of digital media, I'm doing what I want to do because I've just been doing it, and it's kind of attracted an audience. So I'm happy to talk to you later about what you can do, but I'd love to hear maybe your ideas for what's missing right now.
Yeah, sure. I feel like one part of engineering that we can do better about is not gatekeeping the path to success. I feel like one thing that we need to know more about is getting involved in research on campus and how does that work. And sometimes there's that barrier between wanting to do research and not knowing how to get involved. And if we can be the force that creates that connection, we're inhibiting engineers from going into this space and creating beautiful work because we're not telling them how to get there. And I think that's where we really need to be. And I'd love to be able to be part of a solution to increase that.
I mean, just being seen and heard sometimes can be the only thing that's needed, because when people just see you, they're like, wow, I relate to her. I resonate with what she's saying. Maybe I can do what she's doing, or something similar, Sometimes we don't realize the impact we're having.
So I know we still have people that want to ask questions, but I'm mindful of the time, and there's a reception there, and we have the book winners that we need to announce. So are we ready? You all should have received a little, what do you call it, lottery ticket?
Raffle ticket.
Rather than call them out individually, we're going to put the numbers, the winning numbers, up here, and then we'll have the books to distribute. Come up and show your ticket to get your book, and Dr. Somara will sign for those, and we'll be available to talk to people afterwards. And we have some refreshments in the back that we can all enjoy. We're not rushing people out of here, but why don't we thank Dr. Somara for the wonderful inspiration. Okay, and those who have the winning tickets, give them to me, and I get a book. No, come on up here, and we'll enjoy each other's company. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was
I think go to the left.